Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to another deep dive.
Hey there.
Today, we are opening up a topic that is, it's arguably one of the biggest stories in the world of fiction right now.
It really is.
But we are looking at it through a very specific and a very intense lens. It's a collision of massive pop culture news, high fantasy literature, corporate media strategy, and, because it's the 2020s, the inevitable culture wars that seem to stick to everything like glue.
It really is a fascinating case study. Usually when we sit down to talk about business or media, we are looking at spreadsheets or box office numbers.
Right.
But today we are looking at the mechanics of fandom, belief system, and what happens when an artist's personal evolution alienates a specific, highly vocal segment of their original audience.
Exactly. And the catalyst for this deep dive is something that, on paper, sounds like the best news possible for fantasy fans. We are talking about Brandon Sanderson.
Oh, yeah.
The man is an absolute machine.
Machine is probably the right word for it, yeah.
Right. He sold over 50 million books. He ran the most successful Kickstarter in history. Literally broke the platform.
$42 million. It's just a staggering number.
And now the news just broke. The Hollywood Reporter announced that Apple TV Plus has closed a massive deal to adapt his Cosmere universe.
Specifically, we are looking at a film adaptation of Mistborn and a television series for the Stormlight Archive. These are the two crown jewels of his literary empire.
Which, for 90% of the internet, was cause for popping champagne. Fans have been waiting for this for nearly 2 decades.
It's the dream scenario.
But, and this is a big bans, we aren't here to talk about the hype train. We aren't here to fan cast who should play Kelsier or Kaladin.
Nope.
We are here to talk about the backlash, because while many fans were celebrating, another corner of the internet saw this announcement and essentially said, this is the beginning of the end.
We have a stack of materials today, but our primary source is a very specific, very heated commentary from a YouTube channel called The Trent. The video is titled, and I'm quoting the source here directly, so buckle up, "Brandon Sanderson's new deal with Apple TV just means more woke gay trash."
Tell us how you really feel, right? No ambiguity there.
None at all. And it's not just one video. This piece references commentary from John Del Arroz fam and taps into a broader sentiment within a specific subset of science fiction and fantasy fandom. Our mission today is to really unpack this perspective. We aren't here to take sides. We aren't here to say who is right or wrong about the quality of a book.
No.
We are here to analyze the arguments made by these detractors. Why do they think this dream deal is actually a disaster? What evidence do they present regarding Sanderson's ideological, and why do they believe the text itself is being compromised?
It's fascinating because usually when an author gets a deal like this, the fear is very standard. It's usually, oh no, the big bad studio is going to take this thing I love and ruin it. They'll change the plot, they'll miscast the lead, they'll dumb it down. But the argument here seems to be different. It seems to be the author has already ruined it, and the studio is just the nail in the coffin.
Precisely. The source material outlines a narrative of betrayal. It's not just about bad writing to them. It's about a moral and theological pivot that they feel undermines the entire foundation work. They are arguing that the call is coming from inside the house.
So let's start at the beginning. Let's dive into segment 1, the deal itself and the immediate reaction. Set the scene for us. What are the nitty-gritty details of this Apple TV Plus agreement?
According to The Hollywood Reporter, which our source cites, Apple TV Plus secured the rights to the Cosmere. Now, for those who haven't read 20,000 pages of Sanderson, the Cosmere is his interconnected universe.
Yeah.
Think of it like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but for fantasy novels. It spans different planets, different magic systems, but there is an underlying connective tissue.
And the plan is big. It's not just one movie.
It is a Mistborn movie, which is basically a heist movie with magic.
Great elevator pitch.
And a Stormlight Archive TV show, which is a massive, sprawling war epic. But the key detail, the one that usually makes fans cheer, is the level of control Sanderson has secured.
The source calls it rarefied control, right?
Yes. Sanderson is serving as the architect of the universe. She has writing roles, producing roles, and consulting roles. But most importantly, he has approval rights.
So he has final say.
The source explicitly compares this to J.K. Rowling or George R.R. Martin and says his control is even greater.
That is rare. Usually you sell the rights, you cash the check, and you just pray they don't make a Dark Tower movie out of it.
Exactly. Usually the author is sidelined, but here Sanderson is in the driver's. He has more control than almost any author in Hollywood.
Which, logically, you would think would protect the adaptation. If the author is the architect, then the vision remains pure. The fans usually want the author to have the final say because they trust the author. But the source material describes the general reaction to this news, the happy reaction, as people clapping like seals.
That's the imagery used. Clapping like seal. It implies a mindless, noisy celebration, a lack of critical thought.
Right.
The source argues that these fans are cheering for their own destruction, essentially. The Trent report's counter-narrative is that this control is irrelevant, or perhaps even detrimental, because of who Sanderson has become.
So the thesis isn't Apple will ruin Sanderson's work against his will.
No.
The thesis is Sanderson is sold out, he's become a cultist of modern progressive ideology, and Apple is just the vehicle for him to push that further.
Correct. The source explicitly labels the upcoming adaptations as woke trash before a single frame has been shot, before a script has been written, before an actor has been cast.
Wow.
The argument is that because Sanderson is now, in their view, bought in to the DEI woke cult, the content will inevitably reflect that. In fact, his control ensures that the woke elements will be front and center because he is the one pushing.
That is a heavy accusation. It really shifts the blame from the corporation to the creator. To understand where this level of distrust is coming from, we have to look at the history, because the source makes a very big deal about the old Sanderson versus the new Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just about his writing style, it's about his soul. Let's unpack segment 2, the evolution of Brandon Sanderson.
This is absolutely crucial to the source's art. They present a timeline of beliefs to prove a contradiction. They aren't just saying, I disagree with him now. They are saying he contradicts his former self.
Okay.
They start with the year 2007. This is positioned as the past Sanderson.
And what was 2007 Sanderson saying? What was the context?
Context matters here. 2007 was a different time politically. J.K. Rowling had just revealed that Dumbledore, the mentor figure in Harry Potter, was gay.
I remember that. It was a huge deal.
Massive cultural moment. And Sanderson wrote an essay on his blog reacting.
And his stance wasn't exactly supportive.
No, the source cites this essay to establish his conservative credential. In that 2007 piece, Sanderson was quite clear about his stance at the time. He stated that he was opposed to gay marriage.
Do we have the specific phrasing? Because in these debates, the wording is everything.
We do. The source quotes him saying, "If asked to do so, I would vote against legislation that would offer tax incentives or an official stamp of approval to gay marriage."
Okay, so that's a policy position.
Yeah.
Very clear. But did he explain the why?
He did, and this is the part the source really hangs on to. He went on to say that his vote would feel like an endorsement of homosexuality, and his conscience wouldn't allow it because it would be a betrayal of myself.
A betrayal of myself. That is incredibly strong language.
It is.
It frames his opposition not just as political or even just religious, but as deeply personal. Like, this is who I am.
Exactly. It frames it as a core identity issue. I
Right.
cannot do this because it betrays who I am. And the source uses this to establish a baseline. This is who they believe Sanderson was, and perhaps who they think he should still be. They view this 2007 version as the honest version. But then they contrast this sharply with present Sanderson. They pull up an SAQ section from his website, archived from 2020.
17 years later. A lot can happen in 17 years.
A lifetime, really. And the tone in 2024 is radically different. The source points out that Sanderson now expresses unequivocal support for LGBTQ+ rights.
Unequivocal, so no wiggle room.
None. He explicitly lists support for gay marriage, trans rights, and non-binary rights.
And it's not just words, right? The source mentions he put his money where his mouth is.
Yes, Sanderson notes in the FAQ that he marked the posting of that update with a sizable donation to the Utah Pride Center and the Out Foundation.
So if I'm looking at this from a neutral perspective, or even a fan perspective, this looks like a classic arc of personal growth. A person holds one view in 2007, they live life, they meet people, they learn more, and they shift their view by 2024. That's usually how humans work.
You would think so.
But how does the source interpret this shift?
They don't see it as growth. They view it as total cope and lies.
Lie.
The source accuses Sanderson of having bent the knee. They aren't saying he learned something new. They are saying he capitulated. They cite his apology, where Sanderson refers to his past writings, including that 2007 essay, as displaying unaware bigotry.
He called his own past writing unaware bigotry.
He did. He apologized for the pain he caused. To the source, this apology is evidence of submission.
So it's weakness.
They describe him as being bought into the ideology. The phrase used is that he has become a
Cultist. That implies brainwashing. It implies he didn't change his mind freely.
Precisely. The source argues that you can't go from considering something a betrayal of self to unequivocal support without completely abandoning your core principles.
I see their logic from that perspective.
They view the 2007 stance as the truth with a capital T, and the 2024 stance as a fabrication designed to please the woke mob.
It's interesting how the source frames the apology. Usually apologizing is seen as a strength, a sign of humility. I was wrong, I learned, I'm sorry. But here, it's framed as weak, as surrender.
Because in the worldview of the source, course, there is no learning when it comes to moral absence.
Right.
If you believe homosexuality is wrong, then apologizing for that belief is a moral failure. It's corruption.
And that leads us directly into the theology of it all. Because we can't ignore the fact that Sanderson is famously Mormon, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the source spends a lot of time analyzing how his new views conflict with his faith. This isn't just politics, it's segment 3, theological conflict.
Right. This adds a whole other layer of intent. Sanderson identifies as a practicing and faithful member of the LDS Church. In his FAQ, he tries to reconcile his faith with his support for LGBT+ rights. And he uses a very specific theological phrase, even Christ learned measure by measure.
Measure by measure. Let's unpack that. What is he trying to say there?
He's arguing for a theology of progression. He believes that the purpose of life is to grow, mature, and understand. He's suggesting that even the divine understanding expands, or at least our understanding. He frames his liberalism on this issue as being a part of that spiritual journey, that learning to love people he previously misunderstood is a religious act.
He also mentions the church itself changing, doesn't sort of back up.
He does. He points out that the LDS Church has made strides, like opposing conversion therapy and allowing preferred names for trans members. He frames himself as perhaps being slightly ahead of the general tenor of the church, but still moving in the same direction.
The source, however, is not buying this theological argument. They aren't buying the measure-by-measure idea.
Not at all. The source's rebuttal, fierce and deeply doctrinal. They argue that Sanderson's views are in direct contradiction to the religion he claims to follow. The source states, quoting here, that homosexual tendencies are disordered and a result of original.
Wow. They are bringing original sin into a discussion about a fantasy.
They are. They cite the biblical destruction of Sodom for the sin of sodomy.
So they're going full Old Testament.
The source explicitly says that these identities are not a creation of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So when Sanderson says God created LGBTQ+ people, or that they are valid in God's eyes, the source counters that this is a lie.
So the stakes here, according to the source, aren't just about a TV show.
No.
It's not just, is the pacing good or is the CGI bad?
No. The source concludes that Sanderson is putting his soul at risk.
His actual soul.
They also argue he is misleading his audience by normalizing what they term wicked evil behavior. It transforms the criticism from literary analysis to a spiritual intervention.
Yeah.
They view him as a wolf in sheep's clothing, someone claiming to be faithful while preaching what they consider heresy.
That explains the level of vitriol. If you truly believe someone is leading people into spiritual ruin, you're not going to be polite about their movie deal.
No, you're not.
It frames the entire conflict as a battle between good and evil, not just critics and fans.
Precise. And this theological disapproval bleeds right into their analysis of his actual writing. Because if you believe the author is morally competent, you start looking for that compromise in the text. This brings us to segment 4, textual evidence.
Right. They aren't just mad about his tweets or his donations. They claim the books themselves are suffering.
They do.
The source focuses heavily on the most recent book, Wind and Truth, which came out in December 2024. What are the specific complaints?
The primary target is a romance between two characters, Relaine and Renarin.
Okay, context time. Stormlight Archive is massive. Who are these guys, and why does their relationship matter to the source?
Relaine is a character known as a listener, or Prashant. For most of the series, his people are the enemy. They are the ones the humans are fighting.
Okay.
He's an outcast who joins the human side, specifically Bridge 4.
So he's an outsider, a literal alien in some ways to the human culture.
Exactly. And Renarin, he is royalty. He's the son of Dalinar Kholin, who is arguably the most powerful man on the planet.
So, total opposite end of the social spectrum.
He's a high-ranking Light Eyes. In this world, eye color determines your caste. Light Eyes rule, dark eyes serve. So you have a massive class difference, a massive species difference, and a history of war between them.
And they get together.
They do. And the source criticizes this heavily. They describe it as forced, out of place, and nonsensical.
Why? Because of the gender?
Right.
Or because of the status? Or is it all just mixed together?
It's a mix of everything, but primarily they argue that because these two exist in such different social scope, the pairing doesn't make narrative sense. They feel it was engineered. They quote a reviewer who calls it pandering on a page.
Pandering on a page. The implication being that Sanderson just wanted a gay couple, so he smashed two action figures together regardless of whether it fit the story.
Exactly. But there's a deeper layer to this argument. Sanderson actually anticipated this criticism.
He did.
In a January 2025 blog post, which the source discussed, Sanderson claimed that he had planned for Renarin to be gay since 2002.
2002.
This was back when he wrote the unreleased version of Way of Crime.
So Sanderson is saying, this isn't new. This isn't me chasing a trend. This was always the plan 20 years ago.
Correct. He's trying to say the character integrity is there, but the source calls this a lie.
A lie? Why? How can they prove it's a lie?
They point back to that 2007 essay we discussed earlier.
Ah, okay. I see where this is going.
Their logic is, if Sanderson was so vehemently against gay marriage in 2007 that he called it a betrayal of his conscience, how could he have planned a sympathetic gay romance for a main character?
I see. They're using his own timeline again. They're saying you can't have been a secret ally in 2002 if you were a public opponent in 2007.
The source calls it retroactive history. They believe he's gaslighting the fan base by pretending he was always this inclusive when the evidence suggests otherwise.
Yeah.
They see it as him trying to rationalize his shift to the woke cult by inventing a backstory for his own writing process.
That is a fascinating catch-22. If he says he planned it, they say he's lying because of his past belief. If he says he changed it recently, they say he's pandering.
There is no winning that argument for him with this audience.
No. Okay, so aside from the romance, the source also brings up what they call linguistic anachronism. This is the modern language problem. This is something I hear about in fantasy a lot. The Starbucks cup problem, but in words.
Exactly. The source argues that the prose in the Cosmere has shifted. It used to feel medieval, appropriate for a high fantasy set. Now they claim it sounds like a modern woke person's blue sky timeline.
Blue sky timeline. That is a very specific internet burn. For those who don't know, Blue Sky became the refuge for a lot of progressive Twitter users after the Elon Musk takeover.
Yep.
So calling it a Blue Sky timeline is shorthand for progressive echo chamber.
Right. They are saying the characters sound like people arguing on social media in 2025, not warriors on a fantasy planet.
Do they have examples? Because vague vibes are one thing, but specific words are another.
They do. The most cited one, and the one that seems to drive the source crazy, is the use of the word therapy.
You're kidding.
In Wind and Truth, Kaladin, the main protagonist who struggles with depression PTSD, is referred to as a therapist.
Wait, they actually use the word therapist like, I'm his therapist.
Yes.
Yeah.
The dialogue cited is, are you his friend? His god? No, Kaladin said. I'm his therapist.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. I can see why that jars people. Therapist feels like a profession with a license on the wall and a couch. It feels very Western, very 20th century.
That is exactly the source's point. They argue that the concept of a therapist and the word itself breaks immersion. It imposes a modern medical framework onto a fantasy world.
Right.
Why not healer of the mind? Why not spirit mender? Why use the clinical term?
It strips the mythic distance away.
Another example they cite is a character calling Kaladin racist regarding his beliefs.
Okay, another modern loaded term.
Again, the source argues that racist is a modern socio-political label that carries a specific weight in our world. Hearing it in a fantasy world makes it feel like the author is lecturing the reader about current events rather than telling a story about made-up cultures.
They feel the characters are speaking in corporate HRs.
Exact. It paints a picture of a world that is losing its unique flavor to conform to modern sensibilities.
And this connects perfectly to their fear about Apple TV Plus sin.
Perfect.
Because if the books were already doing this, if the books were already introducing therapists and racism discourse, what happens when you add a Silicon Valley tech giant to them? Let's move to segment 5, the Apple TV Plus factor.
This is where the conspiracy theory really expands.
Yeah.
The source views Apple TV Plus not as a neutral distributor who just wants to sell subscriptions, but as an active enforcer of the ideology they detest.
They see intent.
They argue that Apple has a mandate for social justice content. They don't think Apple makes art. They think Apple makes propaganda.
They mention some specific shows as proof, don't they?
They list Foundation. Now, Foundation is based on Isaac Asimov's work. The source criticizes race swapping in that adaptation, where characters who were white men were cast as women of color.
Okay.
They mention Murderbot Diaries and Pluribus. They claim almost every show on the platform features over-the-top LGBTQ moments that feel forced.
And they tie this directly to the leadership at Apple. This isn't just accidental, it's from the top down.
The Tim Cook effect. The source speculates that because CEO Tim Cook is gay and has made diversity central to Apple's corporate identity, this filters down into every piece of content.
Wow.
They argue that storytelling takes a backseat to diversity initiatives.
So bringing it back to Sanderson.
Yeah.
The fear is that the adaptation will be a double whammy. You have an author who, in their view, has already compromised the source material with modern politics.
Yep.
And now he's partnering with a platform that mandates those very things.
Exactly. The source predicts the show will be the answer to Amazon's Rings of Power or HBO's House of the Dragon.
And they don't mean that as a compliment. Rings of Power gets a lot of hate from this same demographic.
No, they view Rings of Power as the ultimate failure, a billion spent to ruin Tolkien with woke politics.
Right.
They think the Cosmere adaptation will be a massive budget failure that alienates the core audience by prioritizing social justice content story.
And they're saying Sanderson's control won't stop.
They explicitly state that Sanderson will not use his rarefied control to protect the original Mistborn Stormlight.
Because in their eyes, there is nothing to protect him. He's one of them.
Right. Why would he protect the old version of his work when he has spent years apologizing for it? Why would he protect the anti-gay marriage era of his writing called Unaware? The source believes he will eagerly cooperate with Apple's man to retroactively change the adaptation to match his current woke. They predict it will be woke, gay, and trans.
It's a very fatalistic view. It's going to be an absolute disaster. They've already written the review before the script is even done.
And that leads us to the final critique, and arguably the most personal one, segment 6, the sold-out narrative.
All right.
Because usually selling out means doing something you hate just for the money. You compromise your art to pay the rent.
But Sanderson, I mean, let's talk numbers again. 50 million books, a $42 million Kickstarter. This guy does not need Apple's money to keep the lights on. He could self-fund a movie if he really wanted to.
That's what makes the sellout accusation unique here. The source acknowledges his financial independence. They note that he had a competitive situation and met with almost every studio head. He could have gone anywhere.
Or nowhere.
Or nowhere. He could have stayed independent.
So if it's not about the money, what did he sell out? What was the currency?
The source argues he sold out ideology. They believe he traded the truth, what they consider the traditional, moral, and medieval values of his earlier work for acceptance.
Acceptance by whom? The fans. He has that.
The Hollywood cult, the in crowd. The source argues that he wants to be patted on the head by the elite. They view his financial success as proof that he could have resisted. He had the leverage to say, no, we are doing it the traditional way, no therapists, no forced diversity. But because he didn't, they see it as a voluntary betrayal.
It's almost worse in their eyes than if he were a starving artist.
Much worse.
If you're starving, you have an excuse.
Yeah.
If you're a king and you bow down, that's a choice.
Precisely. The source also touches on the fan dynamic. They know they're in the minority. They know millions of people are excited.
How do they reconcile that? If everyone else is happy, why do they think they are right?
The source acknowledges Sanderson's loyal legion of fans, but the way they describe them is telling. They predict these fans will massively downvote their video.
Because they can't accept the truth.
That's the phrase. The source positions themselves as the truth teller in a world of delusion. They claim to stand for what is true, right, good, and beautiful against a wicked, evil agenda.
It really frames the conflict as a holy war.
It does.
On one side, the seal-clapping masses who are brainwashed by the cultist author. On the other, the brave few willing to speak the truth about original sin and bad writing.
It's a classic remnant mentality. They believe they are the guardians of the true faith, both religious and literary, while the institution, Sanderson and his fandom, has fallen into apostasy.
Right.
They are the only ones seeing the emperor has no clothes, or in this case, that the emperor has a rainbow flag.
Okay, let's take a breath. We've unpacked a lot here. We've gone from a Hollywood deal to a theological inquisition.
Yeah.
We've talked about ancient Sodom and modern Apple TV.
It's certainly a dense web of grievances. It connects disparate dots into a single narrative of decline.
So to summarize this deep dive, we have a major collision. On one hand, Brandon Sanderson secures a dream deal with Apple TV Plus, granting him unprecedented control as the architect of the Cosmere on screen.
Right. For most, this is a victory. It's the validation of decades.
But for the detractors, analyzed via the Trent Report, this is the final nail in the coffin.
They view Sanderson's personal evolution from opposing gay marriage in 2007 to championing LGBTQ plus rights in 2024 as betrayal of self and a submission to a woke cult.
They see this ideological shift infecting his recent books with forced romances and modern terminology like therapist, breaking the fantasy immersion.
They think the text itself is rotting from the inside out.
And they believe Apple TV Plus will only accelerate this, resulting in an adaptation that prioritizes diversity mandates over storytelling, with an author who is too bought in to stop it.
So they believe the show is doomed before it starts.
It's a fascinating, if polarized, moment in fandom history. It raises a really provocative question to close on. The source claims Sanderson sold out, but they also admit he has total control and financial freedom.
Right. He is holding all the cards.
So if an artist changes their worldview over 20 years and then uses their absolute power to change their art to match that new worldview, is that selling out?
Or is that the ultimate definition of artistic autonomy?
That is the question. Usually, we say an artist sells out when they change for others. But if he changed for himself, is it still selling.
And at what point does an author's personal growth betray the expectations of the audience who fell in love with who they
Do we own the version of the author we first met, or do we allow them?
If they change into something we morally oppose, can we still read?
There's something to think about next time you pick up a book or turn on Apple TV Plus.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.